Welcome. Today I'm joined by Jaclyn Jeffrey, a retired Strata manager, consultant, writer, and real estate expert with Burke By Burke. Welcome, Jaclyn.
Thanks, Thomas.
Today we're going to talk about positive community culture. So how do you create warmth in a condo community, Jaclyn? This is like the big question, right?
It's tough to do, but it's absolutely doable. And it's really important it's important to have a positive community culture in these small spaces that you live in.
And why does that matter?
Oh, this is great. So it's your house. You live there. And just like, I grew up in a small little subdivision with not in an HOA, not in a condo, but just on a street. And you knew your neighbors. Everybody got to say hi. You played with the kids up the street. And a condo should be no different than that. You want to live with your neighbors and be happy living there. People that enjoy living in their building, they take greater pride in it. If you include everybody feels better. They're going to pick up that trash they see in the hallway. They're going to treat the property better. If there's a problem, they're probably just going to talk to their neighbor instead of immediately going to the Strata council, putting extra stress on them, or going to the Strata management company, complaining to them. It's just nice if you can talk to your neighbors and you feel comfortable doing that.
You see, that's really interesting. I do get the sense that a lot of condo communities feel a bit more like an office building where you kind of get in and you kind of look down in the elevator. You're not really engaging with your neighbors. And, that's something that I guess has kind of a cultural thing. And that leads us into the whole series of what lies behind the challenges of creating that warmth.
Yeah. Well, you've got them listed there. Differing values. If you look at the Lower Mainland, anywhere really, you're going to have people from all walks of life living in a building. When I used to live in a condo, I lived in a 300-unit condo, give or take. And we had young families, old retirees. We had people, that grew up in Vancouver. We had people that had just immigrated from Iran, language barriers. There were people that just never spoke English. We had everything under the sun living in a 28-story building. So that's a lot going on in one place.
It is a lot going on in one place, and we are in a very multicultural society. And, for the most part, that adds a lot of opportunity, but it can create that culture clash.
Yeah, it does. And on top of that, you've got different people that have got pets, you've got renters, you've got people that have bought units and never actually even seen their units. And on the bottom of that list is parking, because nearly everyone has a car, and those are the things that cause a lot of challenges.
Yes, I think even if you didn't have the other barriers and cultural issues, the small conflicts that arise in condo communities come down to those 3 Ps. It's funny because in my neighborhood, I know my neighbors, everyone gets along, and the contentious issue is trees. So, it's a slightly different vibe than the usual over the condo challenges.
Yeah, exactly.
And, let's talk about creating these positive foundations.
Perfect. So it really doesn't take much to make a positive community. And you've got them listed here. It's the big thing is communication. If people feel like they can talk to their neighbors, they can talk to their strata council, they can talk to their manager, all through the proper channels, of course, it takes a lot of stress off. So if I have a problem with my neighbor, and I can just go over and, tap on their door and say, hey, that fish that you cooked for dinner last night and then reheated in the microwave this morning kind of seeped into my unit. I just want to let them know that it's a problem. If I can talk to them, I don't have to then bother the strata council or bother the strata manager that's saying, my neighbor is cooking fish and it's really bothering me. I can just talk to my neighbor about it, let them know my concerns. We can have an open discussion. because sometimes when you send things to councils or the strata manager, both are really busy. They probably only meet once a month, once every 6 weeks. You're not going to hear back right away. So then you're just going to start to get really angry. So I'm not going to say always cut out your council or your strata manager, but chat with your neighbor. It's going to probably resolve 99% of the issues.
Right. And that's important because you can avoid going to that next level.
The next level, which is fair and consistent governance. So if you're a strata council member or a strata, if you're a strata council member, because the strata manager is not the one that's enforcing the rules, they're handing the rules over, they're handing the issues over to the council and giving them some guidance. But if you're a council member, if you apply the bylaws and rules evenly across the board, you're not going to run into the issues of a person saying, well, the council likes Thomas because he does all this work for them and he gets away with everything. So if you just govern appropriately, follow the bylaws, and apply them to everyone evenly, whether they're a renter, whether they're an owner, whether they're on council. I know because when I was on council, I broke a bylaw once. It was applied evenly. So making sure that you're applying things straight across the board is great. You don't have to be a real stickler for the rules. You do have to follow the rules.
Yes.
But maybe when somebody breaks a rule, just chatting with them first and getting to the root of it is what some councils, especially in smaller stratas where they have the ability to do that, is getting to the underlying root of the problem before immediately going to that $200 fine or the $500 fine.
Well, what you're seeking is compliance with the community's rules and bylaws, right? It's usually best to try the conversational approach before you go after the punitive one.
Exactly. It's not always feasible. I mean, if you're a 500 unit building, you can't be having a conversation with everyone, and you really do need to streamline the process. But sometimes that streamline involves a general letter first or a general email first. Doesn't always necessarily mean immediately you're going to get a fine unless you comply. So maybe just a heads up, you broke a rule, don't do it again. If you do it again, we're gonna have another conversation.
I gotta ask, Jacqueline, what bylaw did you break?
I thought for a brief period, I thought I was gonna be a gardener on my 22nd floor balcony. And I overwatered those plants. A, they all died. But B, my neighbor just had like a waterfall of water and dirt coming down. And because I lived in a secure building and he didn't know how to get up to this next floor up, eventually he did once I did it like the third or fourth time. I immediately got a pretty harsh letter from my strata management company, who will remain unnamed, just saying, you flooded your neighbor's patio. It's a $200 fine. And then it did, I responded to the letter. I did not have to ask for a hearing with the council and said I didn't know. And I finally, I actually got to talk to the downstairs neighbor because he did find his way up one day when I did it again. And he said, just so you know, you're flooding me. Like you're just sending a pool of rain down every time you water your plants. And mud down. So I still had the garden. The plants were all dead by that point anyway. So
lesson learned.
Lesson learned. I'm not a gardener, and I rained on the neighbor.
And a good case study on engaging in that communication with your neighbor when you can, because you can diffuse some of that tension and create that understanding.
Exactly. Thankfully I begged for forgiveness, told them that I talked to the neighbor and I would not do it again. And I did not get the $200 fine.
Hey, look at that. Success.
Success on all fronts.
Absolutely. And what are we talking about with inclusion and representation?
So you want to make sure everyone feels included. And I know from managing buildings, especially managing buildings in downtown Vancouver, there's a high amount of tenants in these buildings. And a lot of the time, tenants feel like they're not included in anything. They don't know what's going on. Most of the time, tenants are never going to be on council. There's rare occasions where they are.
Right. Special bylaws,
special exceptions. But by and large, the council is made up of resident owners. So you want to make sure tenants feel included, whether that's making sure they have copies of the files, which the owner is supposed to give them when they move in. Realistically, that probably happens 50% of the time. If you're lucky enough to have a building with a building manager, have the building manager give a copy to the tenants. And a lot of councils will argue, well, that's not my problem. That's not my fault. I don't need to do that. But if you just take that extra step, that tenant now feels like they're a part of the community. If they feel welcomed in, you know, they know where the garbage room is, they know where the parking lot is, where the parking space is, they're less likely to cause trouble if you know who they are. And if they know what's going on in the building, you know, they are eligible to get copies of the minutes. Do they really care? Maybe, maybe not, but maybe if they had access to them, they would know that things are coming up, like a fire inspection, that they need to get, you know, they need access to the suite for,
Certainly.
or that the windows are being washed. I think it's just nice to feel like you're part of the community, even if you don't own the unit.
Absolutely. And when you are in a situation where you've got an investor owner that might not be communicating what's happening in the building with you, then you definitely would feel that disconnect.
You do feel the disconnect. And some successful buildings, and we will talk about that later, what successful buildings do, but it does involve tenants and making them feel welcome. But
right. And strategies. You know, there are events listed. I've actually got a slide on that at the end. Talk to me more about these other items.
I'm a big fan of these, and I know all of my Strata manager friends are just cringing right now. I think events in Stratas are the best thing for making a positive community culture. As a Strata manager, I think I've never attended one. I've also never had to organize one. There's always been a council committee for it.
Yes.
But I'm a big fan, because if people have, like, I'm also a big fan of potlucks because I enjoy eating other people's food. It's a fun fact. But I think community potlucks, community Christmas parties, any reason to get together is great. You get to meet your neighbors. So if there's ever an emergency, you know that, like, you know, Iris lives alone with her cat and she might need some assistance getting down the stairs, or, you know, she has a cat. We should probably get the cat out of the unit. So I think it's important, so you get to know your neighbors. And also it's fun. It's fun to go to a potluck and, you know, eat somebody's mushroom toast that they made, or their, you know, weird casserole. It's great. And also it's fun. And who doesn't want to have fun in the place that they live?
Totally true. I can also see why a property manager might want to avoid that whole situation.
It makes them cringe, because they're like, I'm gonna get asked to organize this. I'm gonna have to do this, that, and the other thing. And you don't.
No, they should. They should.
It's not a property manager's job to do any of that, or even to attend them.
Yeah.
But I've done, you know, I've had councils that have done, when I used to manage condos on a ski resort, and they used to have like ski days together. I didn't get invited on that. That one I wish I did get invited on, but you know, that's fine. Potlucks, Christmas parties. I had one Strata that was a 55 plus building, and they had they lovingly called it the pub, was their shared space, and it had a pool table, and it actually did have a bar in it, and they would have happy hour every Friday. And that's actually how they kept an eye on some of the older people in the retirement community that didn't have families. So they would say, like, oh, you know, Ed wasn't here, maybe we should go check on him. So that I think is also important for
and talk about loneliness when you're you know, of an age where you don't have that family support.
Exactly.
Creating those gatherings, and in those, as you've got listed here, purposeful shared spaces where you can have that potluck, or you can get together to have that event.
Exactly. We a lot of buildings boast having these amenity spaces that nobody uses. You'll have like this great big party room, and the only way you get to use it is if you jump through a whole bunch of hoops that are needed. Those rules are important. They're needed, but they sit unused most of the time. So if you could think of a different way where you could have that space that was usable for a potluck, for like a weekly game night, for anything that gets people together into the space, it's just going to make more people coming together and getting to know their neighbors and taking pride in their building. So while I think it's important, shared spaces, amenities definitely need to have rules. Those rules need to be enforced. They're there for a reason, but making them a little bit more accessible goes a long way.
Absolutely. And speaking of simple strategies, onboarding packages.
Yes, onboarding packages. Most strata management companies send out the typical package when a new buyer gets their unit. It usually has the bylaws, a Form K template, not much else. Some stratas go a little bit further, and these are the ones that have the luxury to have an on-site caretaker or a concierge, and they'll make their own onboarding package that points to, these are the top rules that you really, like, you're not probably going to read the entire bylaw package, but these are like the important ones that you should really pay attention to. Renovations, noise, move in, move outs, things that are really broken quite regularly. Others have gone through and said, like, these are where the garbage room, this is where the garbage room is. These are emergency contacts. These are trades that we regularly use. You can have a whole bunch of stuff in one.
Absolutely. Even from how you break down your recycling and what objects are too large to go into the garbage room and what they're supposed to do in that situation. Like there's some pretty,
I worked with a pretty big building in North Vancouver, and they had a big problem with garbage. Everybody would just dump their garbage everywhere. Recycling was never in the right container. So in their onboarding package, they went through and just kind of detailed, like, we have an extensive recycling program. This is where all the things go. And they took it a step further. And every time a new person moved in, tenant or owner, they had the caretaker walk down and walk them through, here's your parking spot, just so you know, so you're not parking somebody else's. Here is the garbage room. And this is kind of how you work through all the different recycling and composting and garbage. So they went through all of that. And it took the garbage room from this awful thing that the caretaker probably revisited 2 or 3 or 4 times a day to, the garbage room is still garbage room, but it was pretty nice inside.
Some of the volunteer opportunities might feed right back into these events that we've talked about. What other types of volunteer opportunities are there that can foster some of this positivity in the community?
Landscaping. Everybody in a building, trees, always complains about the landscaping. It's either not good enough, everyone's got a creative suggestion. Maybe we need more flowers at the front door, or maybe we need flowers that are going to bring bees to the yard. Anything landscaping. And that's probably a big one, because that's an easy one to get involved in. You're not asking people to dig in the dirt, but asking people, like, maybe you want to be the person that reports back to the Strata Council, especially if there's someone on the council that really is into gardening as well. You can have a couple of them meet, and when there is a big landscaping project, it takes a lot of strain off the rest of the council who may not be interested in that particular area, and gives it to somebody who is, and gives suggestions to the Strata Council saying, well, maybe we should have a fountain here with some shrubs and a tree. And then the council can go and look at it, and they can task that person to talk to the landscaper, so that the council or the Strata manager doesn't have to be so involved in a project that they may not be that invested in.
I like that. And I was glancing around looking for the book on data I recently read. I'm big on data. And one of the interesting tidbits in it was that in terms of activities and how happy you think they're going to make you and how happy they actually make you, and that can be more or less, gardening was one of the best. You think it's going to be this good, and it's actually better. So anybody can do it and can learn. And I love that one.
Yeah.
You touched on this theme a bit earlier, Jacqueline, but conflict resolution, how does this become something that's effective and something that doesn't build on itself?
There's going to be times where this works. And in all honesty, there's times where it just doesn't work. But as a council, you should always encourage the owners to chat with one another first. Try and resolve the issue outside of a bylaw letter, because and I'm speaking from experience, when you get that bylaw letter, you immediately become defensive and pretty angry.
Totally.
Nobody gets the letter and be like, oh yeah, I totally had that party. That was way too loud. 100% deserve this. No, that's not how somebody feels when they get a bylaw letter. They're instantly angry. So if you can avoid the bylaw letter, it's going to be great. If you can just chat with your neighbor and say, hey, just so you know, your kids that are playing in the courtyard, they should be playing in the courtyard. It's great, but maybe they don't scream at the top of their lungs at 6 a.m. right in front of the window. Like maybe you can, put them, right. Encourage them to play like in front of your own unit, not in front of my unit. So having that conversation with the owner is always first, but there's just times where it's not feasible. Like in my situation, my downstairs neighbor didn't know how to get up to me. Absolutely. And probably didn't want to go through the hassle of saying, hey, down to the concierge and saying, hey, do you know the person that lives above me? They flooded out my patio. So, that there's instances where it doesn't work, or there's instances where you might just have a really grumpy person that you don't want to deal with in the strata and you want to avoid them. Maybe don't engage with that person. So if it's safe, if you feel comfortable doing it, you should just talk to your neighbors first. It probably won't escalate past that.
I think also it's very easy to get mad at your balcony getting flooded and all of the water and dirt and mud 100%. Coming down. It's a little bit less of a thing if you're able to look that person in the eyes and they go, oh, I really did not think about that.
Exactly. A lot of the times the conflicts that arise are like over something silly. Like maybe flooding your neighbor's patio with dirt and water isn't the silliest, but also I didn't know I was doing it. And if he had just mentioned, hey, just so you know, every time you're watering, this is happening, I probably would. Well, once I did find out, I immediately stopped doing it. Yeah. But same thing as if you talk to your upstairs neighbor and say, oh, by the way, your high-heeled shoes that you wear all day long on your wood floors, I can hear those. They may say, go pound sand. I'm going to wear my high-heeled shoes all the time anyway. But they may say, oh, geez, I never realized that. I'm not going to do that anymore. So.
True. And this fair application of bylaws, I think this refers to the Strata Council choosing to take it to that next step when it needs to, because there's either a difficult resident or a situation where you can't resolve it amicably. And that's when you turn to the bylaws.
I don't live in a dream world where everything's resolved by talking to your neighbors. There's going to be times where you have to apply the bylaws, and you just have to apply them fairly across the board. But you do need to listen and review the response that comes back from the person who violated the bylaw. They have a chance to respond. They have a chance to ask for a hearing. Yes. And the council has a duty to review those responses. And hearings aren't necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it is really good to have that conversation with the person that violated the bylaw, because that can stop it from escalating even further, because after the hearing, you're down the road into CRT and legal world, and that's just
seen a lot of that, and the cost and effort and energy that goes into that is just so negative and not productive. And if you can get to that happier place where there's harmony, then or at least an understanding of where the line is between what you're allowed to do and what is restricted by your community's bylaws, and you can adjust that and those rules if you get the support of the ownership at an upcoming meeting. So yes, and how does the property manager play into this whole resolution scenario?
This strata manager has seen it all, so they are a great resource for their experience. They've probably gone through hundreds of noise complaints, and while they can't say for sure, it's always the council that needs to make the determination of, yes, we believe this is a bylaw that's been broken. As a manager, I can't say, yes, Thomas definitely broke that bylaw. You should 100% fine him $200. That's not the role of the strata manager. The strata manager's role is to provide, in instances where a party happened at 2 a.m. and didn't stop until 4 a.m., yes, that could be viewed as a bylaw violation, but do you
Yeah.
think it was unreasonable noise? And they can give you their experience on how they dealt with situations and give suggestions on how maybe the council wants to deal with the situation. They're also going to be
Sure.
the experts on the Strata Property Act. So the steps, the exact steps, if it does come to a fining situation or a other type of governance situation, what steps need to be taken to be in compliant with all the acts and regulations that British Columbia has us following.
Because there are specific timelines that need to be followed for these as well.
Exactly. Also, your strata manager is impartial. They don't live in the building. Their job is to make sure that the strata council is following the rules, the building is well maintained, and the money is where the money is supposed to be. But they don't live there, so they don't, they don't feel bad if Joe broke the bylaw or if Joe's doing something that's bugging someone else, because the strata manager goes home to their house, which is probably in a condo somewhere, and they're dealing with their own stuff, but they're not emotionally invested in your building.
That's the best
so they
way
can
to
be
put it.
impartial. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And you have some real life examples for us.
Do I ever? Let's see. Ooh, transparent council. So I had a building in North Vancouver. And it was a fairly large building. It was 2 towers. There was a lady in it. She has recently retired, and so she had nothing to do, and she would nitpick on everything in the building. She would, the council's not doing this, the council's not doing the other thing. The elevator was dirty at 11:03. Anything that she could find in the run of the day. I think she's probably sent dozens, between the monthly meetings, dozens of emails to me. Somehow she had the council president's email address. I don't know how she got it. She would send messages to him. So, and then she would read the minutes of the council meeting and say, well, you didn't review my correspondence. So the council president did get pretty fed up with it and said, you know what, let's invite her to a council meeting. He invited her to a council meeting. They had a council hearing with her ahead of time and said, you're welcome to stay to the meeting, to explain, these are the struggles that we go through. We meet once a month. It's a big building. We're reviewing dozens of quotes every month. There's real bylaw infractions, not that the elevator was dirty at 11:03 a.m. And invited her to stay for the meeting. She saw everything that went on within reason. There was no privacy breaches, so she had to leave during certain parts of the meeting.
Right.
But after that, she had a real understanding of what the council did, and we never heard from her again. We did hear from her at AGMs, but she never wanted to volunteer for council. We got the impression she just wanted to be heard, but she also didn't understand how the council operated and how the strata manager operated with the council. So once she got an understanding of the things that the council goes through and all of the different things that keep a big building running, that the council's responsible for, she went, I guess if, the elevator is dirty at 11:03 is not the end of the world, as long as it's getting cleaned every day.
Yeah.
So that
exactly
that helps. Having the council that wasn't scared to talk to the owner. They didn't ignore her. They weren't mean to her. They heard her concerns and then explained, this is what we go through. You're more than welcome to join council and also go through this with us, which she didn't want to do. But that was a good positive. There's a really positive outcome of that. Yeah.
Great.
Another thing, which I touched on earlier, the importance of welcome packages and onboarding for all residents. There's a fairly large tower in downtown Vancouver, so a lot of tenants. Probably upwards of 40% of the building was tenants. The rest were live-in owners, which is actually really highly skewed to owners in that part of the city. But that council really took it on themselves to make a very comprehensive onboarding package outside of the package that we sent as the strata management company. So every owner would get a copy of the bylaws and the forms that they need to fill out. But this was a nuts and bolts, how do you live in this building? So, common bylaws that get broken, renovation bylaws were, pulled out and put separate in there because it was an older building. So people were really renovating all the time. How the garbage worked, because these had garbage chutes, not just garbage cans. And the ins and outs of the area and some other tidbits that they thought would be interesting for people that lived in there. And this
Great.
council did it all on their own. So this was not the strata manager did not have to put to get down, like, you know, the urban fair is open till 10 p.m. and it's just around the corner kind of thing. So this was, council did it. They also had a 24/7 concierge staff. So they're a little lucky in this respect, but they made sure that concierge walked whoever moved into the building around and point out, here's your parking stall, here's the garbage room, this is where your garbage chute is, you know. And they had some different garbage areas. They had like a large item bin, so you point that out. He would point out, you know, this is where the gym is, these are the amenity rooms, these are how you book them. He went through everything in the building, and for a downtown building, there were very few issues in that building, because part of the onboarding process was the concierge or the council member, because there were some times where a council member volunteered to do it, put a face to the name. So they knew that Ed lived in unit 2201. So they, you know, if there was ever any issue, they'd be like, oh, that's so-and-so, he lives there with, you know, his dog and his wife, kind of thing. Right. So it was, you got to know the place. So it worked for council, so they could put a face to the name, but it also worked for the owner, because then they just felt like it didn't matter if you were a tenant or if you were an owner, you got the same warm welcome. Yeah. So you really felt like
you lived there. You felt like you were part of the community.
Yeah.
And you have one slightly negative case to share with us.
On the flip side of all of the good things in fostering community culture was probably the building devolved from a very positive place to a very negative place super quick, because the council just took really hard stands without understanding what the community wanted. This was back before electric vehicles were a big thing. And the council said, nobody's ever going to buy an electric car. We don't need to put plugs in. So one guy had bought an electric car and he wanted to put a plug in, and they just, without even listening to him, nothing, just nope, flat out no. So that was the one. And that kind of escalated because he had the car, he wanted to make changes. They wouldn't even listen to him.
Right.
They wouldn't work with him on anything. Then Airbnbs kind of rolled into the picture after the electric cars, and they just took a hard nope stance on it, and they went really far into it and started what some owners would argue was encroaching on their personal liberties per se, and just investigating. Like they were searching the internet for Airbnb listings. They just took it to like a next level, and then it didn't matter what people did. It turned into a really negative community. People didn't enjoy living there. There was a lot of sales during the time. The owners lost trust in the council because they felt like they were only focused on these two issues and putting roadblocks up. The council never wanted to talk to the owners. So it resulted in having tons and tons of observers at council meetings, which makes it really uncomfortable for the council trying to do the daily business in these meetings, but it also makes it really uncomfortable for the strata manager. The strata manager doesn't want to manage the building. It becomes a really challenging environment where nobody wants to be there. And it probably all could have been avoided by just having some conversations at the beginning and saying, like, while we don't want Airbnbs in the community, but maybe there's some ways we can work around this, or, you know, we're not big on electric vehicles. Hindsight, they probably have electric vehicle plugs now, but, you know, like
I'm
talking
sure
to
they
the
do.
owners,
Yeah.
they probably do. But just having some conversations and understanding where people are coming from probably would have gone a long way before getting into legal action and just an uncomfortable situation where nobody wanted to be involved in it.
Well, once again, transparency comes up as being a major issue. The more closed you are, the more difficult that community environment is. And I think that kind of goes for everyone in it.
Yeah.
I threw together one last slide with some of the ideas that you had mentioned on warmth, and a bunch that had been put together courtesy of my mother, who was on the HOA board for her community. And she's an events specialist. So she put together a list of wonderful things that you could do with your neighbors. You've suggested the potluck, which somehow didn't make it onto my list exactly. But we do have the taco or sushi party, which is kind of touching on
It's the
that
same
food
thing.
element.
Exactly.
But we'll put a little downloadable link so that people can get some ideas and some inspiration to get going. I think I want to reiterate that this is not the responsibility of your strata manager. This is for your council or for engaged committee owner members within your community to try and create some excitement, some events, and some camaraderie among your neighbors. And hopefully they become your friends. So with that, I'm going to jump over to a couple of questions of Q&A. We as always, ran fully on this session into all sorts of great stuff.
Yeah.
You had mentioned if there was one thing, is it the potluck? Is that the magic thing? Like, what would you start with?
I would start with a potluck, but I think there are people that are maybe like, I don't want to eat like out of a dish that other people have scooped food out of. So I get that, there are people that don't like germs. My building had games night, which as a not
Awesome.
big game person, I still went to because I don't have games. And it was really fun. So easy things. I would always go to a potluck. If there's a potluck anywhere and I'm able to get there, I will be there. I love them. But a games night, super easy.
So those that are watching can see that we've got a website below that talks about Jaclyn's adventures. Jacqueline, it looks like you're working from a home office, but you're
It
not.
does.
What is hard
No.
departure?
I live on a sailboat, and this sailboat is down in the tropics right now. So while this looks like an office, I can assure you it is not an office. It's the salon or living room of our sailboat that we live on.
Fantastic.
And the website, Hard Departure, just talks about all the different ways people can get ready to go sailing and all of the ridiculous things that we do on the sailboat, which, spoiler alert, there's a lot of potlucks in the sailing community. So big fan.
That's not where it ends, though, because you continue to act as a consultant, a writer, and advisor to those in the real estate industry.
That's right. I do write real estate articles for a couple of real estate websites and also assist some other companies with their blogs and some consulting on the side.
Excellent. Everyone, reach out to Jacqueline from harddeparture.com. Next week, we'll have Sonia Blackburn of Access Insurance talking with us about what you need to know about small strata insurance.
So exciting.
So, thanks, Jacqueline.